The show is not for everyone. It's for anyone who wants to listen, but it's not for everyone. If you like your religion reduced down to easy-to-swallow dogmas, where the Bible or the pastor or the church always clearly says, then this show is not for you. This show is for the wanderers, the seekers, the skeptics, the ex-evangelicals, the spiritual but not religious, the religious but not spiritual, the crystal girlies, the deconstructionists, the misfits, punks, and problem children of the religious world. On this show, we cut the crap, lay it all on the table, and let all of us decide where we go from there. Also, we swear on this one. So buckle the fuck up, because here we fucking go. This is Cut the Crap, an intentionally heretical podcast where we normally have or attempt to have non-dogmatic and honest conversations about important spiritual topics. Today is going to be heavy on the honest conversation because this is we have set up like a regular cadence, and so we put out an episode a week ago called Forgotten Country. If you're watching this somewhere in the recesses of time, I don't know that matters, but a week ago we put out an episode called Forgotten Country about, Christianity's weird relationship to power. And then a thing happened. And we walked into this show with the title. This show is entitled Well Shit. This is Cut the Crap, Well Shit. I think it's well... If you're looking at this in your podcatcher or your YouTube, it's probably SH*T, because I think I'm going to get I'm amazed we get away with a show called Cut the Crap in all of the algorithmic shit. And I don't think we're going to get away with a show entitled Well Shit. And so it's going to, but the show is entitled Well Shit because an election happened in the United States, and it, from, I think, the perspective of those of us on this podcast, it broke bad. And so we're going to sit in the it broke bad. And we're going to get to why I think we're talking about this into microphones. But we're going to open, I'll throw to you, Emily, to kind of introduce. We're going to open with like a liturgy to help, instead of an essay, to help ground our conversation.
Yes, it seemed appropriate in this time where we are all sort of reeling from big emotions to reground ourselves. And so this liturgy is one I came across that I really appreciated by author, poet, and speaker Cole Arthur Riley. For those who wake feeling betrayed by their country.
Just because you've braced yourself for the worst doesn't mean it's any less terrifying when it comes. Today is not for shallow platitudes and sentimental pep talks, nor is it the time to demand more work from Black women and those who have given their very bodies to attempt to redirect the ship to shore. Today is for grief, for deep breathing and safe arms. This country is a curse of its own design, but we remain.
Quote, "And I cried for all of the women who stretched their bodies for civilizations, only to find ruins." Sonia Sanchez.
Quote, "I did not tell you that it would be okay, because I have never believed it would be okay. What I told you is what your grandparents tried to tell me, that this is your country, that this is your world, that this is your body, and you must find some way to live within the all of it." Ta-Nehisi Coates.
And I have seen the death parade marching through the torso of the earth, sculpting mud bodies in its path. I have seen the destruction of the daylight and seen bloodthirsty maggots prayed to and saluted. Ashada Shakur.
Inhale. I'm not foolish for hoping. Exhale. I won't rush from this grief.
Inhale. The world reveals itself. Exhale. For what we've known it to be.
Inhale. I won't expedite my grief. Exhale. To alleviate the tension. So that liturgy comes from a book called Black Liturgies. It is probably if you know any of those authors' names, it comes from the Black tradition. And while a lot of us feel disappointed and let down by our country in this moment, it's probably worth noting for some folks in our country, this feeling ain't new. It's been going on for 400 years in some cases. And for some folks in this country who were here first, longer than that.
Right.
So, I like that liturgy for what it says and how it makes me feel. I also like that liturgy for the grounding it helps me have of, yes, do I feel profoundly disappointed by apparently the majority of voting adults in not even just a majority of electoral votes, majority of voting adults in this country? Yeah, I feel profoundly let down, profoundly hurt, profoundly worried about the future. But for a lot of folks who also feel that in this moment, this feeling has been every day for centuries, since folks who look like me arrived in this land. So you look, the grand arc of history, in the word, me misquoting MLK as usual. The grand arc of history does turn towards justice, but also, there are a lot of bumps along the way, and for me personally, like this is sitting in a bump, right? Look, that the orange narcissist man has been elected before, right? But that time, there were some differences. One, we didn't know how bad it would be. And now we have like a 4-year example of what he's like, and yet a majority of U.S. adults elected him anyways. I think that's part of it for me. The other part of it is last time he lost the popular vote. Actually, both previous times he lost the popular vote. And this time he did not. And that, I think that is the piece that for me, we'll talk about, I think, or I have no idea what the fuck we're going to talk about. This is the least planned episode. This is the least planned podcast I may have ever done. I have no run of show. We have no points. This liturgy got planned minutes before we went live. Like, I have no idea what this is. No idea what this is about other than sitting in a thing that fucking sucks. But I think part of what specifically sucks in this moment for me that's different from other moments is not just the magnitude, not just the fact of the victory, because I've seen bad people squeak into that office before. Mm-hmm. It is the commanding nature of that victory. And maybe there's a lot of votes sitting in Maricopa County. Fuck you, Maricopa County. They're like, they sent out this thing in election like, maybe it's gonna be like 2 weeks. We don't fucking know. And I'm like, that is like not acceptable, Maricopa County. I'm losing all of our listeners in Maricopa County. Fuck off, Maricopa County. Like, Jesus Christ. Count the fucking votes. But anyway, so maybe a week from now, those numbers will shift. They certainly as hell don't look like they're going to. And that's part of it for me.
I think, so yesterday, I know we have not aired it yet, but we recorded an episode of Cut the Crap that you will see with Jude Mills.
That's next week. Our whole production schedule is just wild.
It's all shifted, right? But it's fabulous conversation. But as someone who is an outsider looking in from the UK, something that she said that stuck with me was, that she noticed that there used to be a moral imperative for office, and now we have elected a felon. We've
elected a convicted felon.
The shift is that there used to be an understood call to morality that I think we've lost.
Well, and to shift that to the theological, that he carries Christian voters by like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like massive margins. The convicted felon carries the religious vote over the lifelong dedicated Catholic goes to mass an absurd number of times a week in Joe Biden, or like or the person who's like in a committed marriage and he's not a felon and like whatever. Like we have like the convicted, like, you know, Hillary Clinton committed lifelong United Methodist, like actual religious person, Hillary Clinton. Lost the Electoral College to a man whose favorite Bible verse is 2 Corinthians. Great. I would love to read that book, 2 Corinthians. That's one of the things that has stuck with me about like Trump and religion is that his favorite Bible verse, you know, when asked his favorite Bible verse, like someone made one up for him clearly, but he didn't know enough to know the book is called 2 Corinthians. But it's always, I get that it's written to core. Like, yes, no, I get that, Donnie. But no. But like he carries this convicted felon, this, you know, person who will tell lies out of pure self-interest, just does, like, naturally is breathing. This person who has been, you know, race baiting and screwing over the people who've worked for him and sexual harassing. You know, he was not convicted of sexual harassment, but he sure did lose a lawsuit about it, which is also how they got OJ. So, like, yeah, like, what the fuck?
Well, and there are those who would say that, you know, Christians shouldn't speak out on politics, but they do.
Jesus does, right? Like, I'm not sure this was, but this was like in the previous episode, right? Like, you know, part of the not actual subtext, the text of the Gospels is Jesus thumbing his nose at the empire. Of just going, I'm preaching in a couple of weeks. Yes, this is still me. You're kicking off the next series. No, I don't fucking know. Yes, I'm preaching in this. 2 weeks from now, I'm preaching. I'm preaching on that scene from John. I'm pulling it from John's Gospel of Jesus and Pilate. So Jesus has been arrested by religious leaders, but like there was no separation between religious leader and political leader. Right. So like they're doing a politics, right? And they're doing a politics so they can't kill him, but the Romans sure can. And so they hand him over to the empire. And, you know, Pilate's like, hey, give me something to work with. I have the power to free you. And Jesus is just like, fuck off. I don't need it. If this was about you, fuck you. Right? Like just like literally thumbing his nose at the empire. Yeah. And so, we can say like, Christians are supposed to be apolitical. Since when?
Yeah. Well, and even John Wesley wrote a thesis on like how you should vote, how you should, you know, what deportment you should have when voting. So he put out 3 rules. He's really good at 3 rules, right?
Yeah.
Wesley did a lot. In 1774, he said, I met those of our society who had votes in the ensuing election and advised them. So, yes, we can advise people as Methodist pastors to vote without fee or reward for the person they judged most worthy. I wonder how he would feel about lobbyists nowadays.
Well, or Elon Musk paying people $1 million to vote.
Right.
In Pennsylvania.
To speak no evil of the person that they voted against. We forgot that part. And then to take care that their spirits were not sharpened against those that voted on the other side.
Yeah.
So even, I mean, this is 1774, right? Because I think what politics does is it doesn't just divide us, but it makes it, it's almost like it gives you permission to be unkind in the world. And that's a thing that we were never called to do, right? To the marginalized. And when it comes from the top down, not just the people who are voting, but it's coming from the person in charge, the one person in charge that was elected. That then gives precedence for everyone else. It gives permission for everyone else to then marginalize others.
We saw this kind of last time, right? Where, you know, huge spikes in racist acts, huge spikes in anti-Semitic acts, like the huge, like, you know, like the Unite the Right shit in Charlottesville comes after. Like, I framed that in my head incorrectly as part of the lead up, but it was not. It was after he was elected. Yes. Then they felt emboldened to go do a racism in Charlottesville, Virginia, and you know, that's a city it's where my wife's from. I will be in Charlottesville in 3 weeks. You know, I know the you know, the spot where the lady was killed. Like, we saw it we studied political communications in college. That was my big part of I studied political communications, theater, and how to overthrow governments using the internet. It's useful. But like there were rules. Even when we were doing a racism, there were rules, right? And then there stopped being rules. And the amount of particularly anti-immigrant rhetoric and anti-trans rhetoric that proved decisive in this election, does not speak well of us as a body politic. That any candidate from a mainstream party is up there saying shit like that, and then that the majority of U.S. adults then looked at it and went, well, okay, sure, I'll vote for that. Mm-hmm. And you can talk all day about like, hey, you know, we held our nose and we voted for I don't know what, because whatever. But still, like, this is the level of kind of discourse and public immorality and public deliberate discrimination that we are, I guess, back to as a country. That there was a season where, there were, even if we were not some anti-racist paradise, like, it seemed to be swinging back another way. Mm-hmm. And fuck, man.
This was the last election that my niece will not get to vote in. She will get to vote. She'll be old enough to vote in the next presidential election. And so she was watching very closely this election and hoping for a different outcome.
Yeah.
And so she is, very worried about her rights as a woman, about her rights as an LGBTQ woman, because she didn't get a say in this one. And so, but I will say it did sort of motivate her, hopefully, and her peers to do differently in the next election, to be hope for the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, that's always,
right?
that's always the hope, right? That's always the hope. Statistically, that hope is challenging. Yes. Voter statistics say that a lot of young people did vote.
Yeah.
Right? And particularly young men voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, anyone who's lived in the gaming quarter of the internet has known this about young men since time immemorial, and certainly for the past 10 years, that they're, I often look at my wife and go, I think there's something wrong with men. I think there's something wrong with men. And we're working on an episode about the patriarchy.
I was about to say, stay tuned for that episode.
But I think we may need a sequel that is just entitled, I think there's something wrong with men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is, look, the nature of our body politic is, there's always a new generation rising to an occasion. Mm-hmm. I just don't. It's not that I worry about kids these days. I worry more about men. It's not again, you run the numbers. It's not a generation thing. It's not those damn Gen Zs that flipped they did not. It was everybody. It was, part of what has fueled the Trump machine from day one is millennial and Gen X, is disaffected millennial and Gen X men. Right? It's men who, look a lot. Concerningly, some of them have the same haircut as me. It's the amount of like right-wing influencers with weird undercuts really, sometimes makes me question my own sartorial choices. But, men who look a lot like me, sometimes too much like me. It's that, that intersection of like cool hipster and youth pastor. That's always, that's been the fuel. That's been the fuel for this all along. And I again, back to like, why am I on the internet talking about this is I think what shocked me is that if we thought the problem was healing, it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if people, I don't know, perhaps I am naive and have too much faith in people still. I don't have faith in political leaders, either side, anywhere. I don't have faith in politicians, but I wonder if I have too much faith in people for them to know what it is exactly that they're voting for. Like what policies, who it is that they are ostracizing, what rights they are taking away from, who they are marginalizing again, which is the opposite of what Christ did, by the way.
Yeah.
Jesus took the marginalized and brought them into the center, the tax collectors, the sinners, the prostitutes, the woman at the well, a million other stories that we can bring in and say, no, Jesus was on their side, not the side of the empire, by the way. But then we go and vote the opposite, right? We vote for the person who is anti-immigrant, all sorts of things.
Anti-people,
anti-reproductive rights,
right.
anti-trans LGBTQ,
well, it is
anti-immigrant, anti-migrant, yes.
Where this fits into like a show about theology, not just Troy got a degree in political science, and can't get this out of his head. I mean, that's part of this. But that's not all of
your
this.
External processing of what's
sure. Maybe we're modeling some external processing that was, that was on the whiteboard of what the fuck is this episode. But I think the other part of it is like he ran on he engaged his campaign, I don't know about him, but he engaged voters theologically, right? Yes. It is like part of why we're talking about this is the theologies, the horrific theologies that are emboldened and contained within this. That, like, it is that, like, this is also an interview with Jude that's coming out next week. Jesus. But like we as Christians, not the three of us, but we as Christians made like homosexuality and people with different identities this like core issue of the faithful on like shockingly limited data. Like it's Romans 1. Fuck off Leviticus. Like, you don't get to do that. You don't. Like, so this is an ongoing but pet peeve of mine. Fuck off on your Levitical arguments. You're wearing clothes of different cloth and eat shellfish. You can go to hell. Jeb Bartlett has a wonderful speech on this. If the Redskins agree to wear gloves, can they play football? Do I have to stone my chief of staff? Can I stone my chief of staff in a quiet private ceremony, or do I have to stone him in public for working on the Sabbath? What price does my Georgetown freshman daughter bear in the slave markets? Right? Like, fuck off. We don't do anything in Leviticus. Stop it. It's a disingenuous argument. It's about Romans 1, but then you're talking about one passage of scripture on which we've built this entire theology. We have to really bend over backwards to make scripture talk about abortion. It does talk about the plan of life, but like modern understand, like they were worried about the opposite. It was just like so many kids die, right? Like, Absolutely. The Bible is a lot about infertility, not a lot about anything else. Like we have built these like that this is Christianity. Christianity is anti-LGBTQ people. Christianity is monolithic against reproductive health care, maybe of any kind, including just birth control.
Right.
Right. That it is weirdly somehow Christianity ended up in favor of guns. I still don't know how we got there. I talked about F-35 Joint Strike Fighters on the show that y'all all listened to last week. Like, I don't fucking know how we made capitalism a Christian value, but like there are the theological Christian nationalist machine comes into office with him. And so those policies, those theologies are at risk of becoming even more the law of the land than they are currently.
Yeah, and that's where I think that I want to hope for the best in people and think maybe they just didn't realize what they were voting for. Like women's reproductive rights, right? So specifically that one I could speak to as, the female on the show.
As the designated woman.
Yeah. As the token female, right. No, but
every podcast needs one.
At least.
We're looking at you, Joe Rogan. One woman. It's a very low quota. One woman.
Yes. But so, when you vote for things like anti-abortion laws, for example, this, and I'm not saying like, let's go kill all the babies. Nobody is saying that.
No, literally nobody's saying that.
Is saying let's go kill babies.
Right.
Despite what some people would lead you to believe.
The billboards in Amarillo.
Right. The billboards in Amarillo do say that. They say horrible things like stop abortion waste.
No.
It's just really big ick factors on those billboards. But the fact that you don't take into the whole picture the mother's care.
Right.
Like there are things that affected when Roe v. Wade was overturned. I, as a mother who suffers from infertility, who was going through IVF treatments to become pregnant, my healthcare was affected by that. Not only just the stress of it, because no woman should have to be that stressed while they're that hormonal and pregnant.
That's actually literally physically,
right.
physically
very
bad
for babies.
Very bad for
babies.
babies.
For fetuses, right?
Yeah.
This is not a good thing. It was so I had a unique perspective in the fact that I had my first daughter before the overturn of Roe v. Wade, and my second daughter afterwards. And so we had already started the ball rolling when that got overturned. But one of the medications that was needed for my second IVF implant, right, to get pregnant, to have a baby, as someone who desperately wanted to have more children, who had prayed for more children, who was, all about the rights of this fetus, was trying to get this embryo implanted, my care was affected because that IVF clinic could not get all of the medications that they could formerly, because some of them are the same that are used between embryo transfer surgeries and abortions, PNCs. And so my experience between baby one and baby two was more traumatic, more stressful, and absolutely did not have to be, but was because of this idea that we should, not kill babies. It affected my healthcare. Like, these are the stories that people don't think. They think that they're all sensational stories of moms bleeding out in parking lots,
which do happen, which are real,
which is real,
right,
and is still happening. Because when you don't care for the people, when you don't think about the big picture, it's not a black and white issue.
And these are the important stories, and I appreciate you sharing that particular story with us. You had mentioned earlier that, maybe you have too much faith in people or others. And I think that's really what's lacking, is that we can't have all of these experiences. I can't have the experiences that you're describing here. But listening and trusting other people's experiences should inform our decisions. And I do see in elections like these turnouts, these results come back, and I wonder how many people enter into these voting booths without trusting others' experiences without taking what they've heard and from their peers and their friends and their families and their communities and bringing those into the voting booths with them. So trust is valuable, and I feel like that may be a little of what's lacking.
Well, I mean, it certainly is lacking, but then also it is hard when these things happen. It then becomes hard to trust.
Yeah.
Right? We went through a tiny version of this in our little Tempest in a Teapot, which is the United Methodist Church, when there was this giant split that was happening, right? And what became the Global Methodist Church and independent Wesleyan churches went one way, and the United Methodist Church went another way, and I have actually experienced a lot of kind of new life and joy in a post-split world. And like that has been some solace. But in the run up to that, there was not a lot of trust in the room, because I knew that there were people actively working for the detriment of people I cared about and trying to get as much money out of us as possible.
That's hard.
And it's tough to trust when they're really after you. Or when they look at a person who is definitely after people you care about, and they go, that makes sense. Right? When did immigration become a Christian issue? Or when did immigration become an issue where Christians are like, get at those immigrants?
Right, as opposed to care for the widows and the orphans.
Right.
And care for the
care
for the stranger.
Right.
Yes.
And this is where someone is just my own protective instinct as a pastor. I serve a congregation, I lead a congregation that is majority immigrant. And so I sit with folks all the time, and I look at that and go, I see the whatever, this is the shit. Like, they're good people. They're good people.
They're good people.
They're amazing.
And I sit here and go, when did it become a Christian value to say fuck those people?
Right, and those people should not have to be worried about someone thinking that they eat dogs.
Oh, God damn it! Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
This is the stuff that is ridiculous, right? These are the sensational stories that you go, yes, we know you don't eat dogs and cats. We know.
Yeah, but it worked. But
and these are the stories that we trust and bring into the voting booth, rather than the stories from those around us.
If you run the numbers like that, the campaign. This is some political communications, but track the kind of right before the debate is when they found that rhetoric.
Yeah.
And they doubled down on it for the rest of the time. And Kamala Harris objectively won that debate. It doesn't matter. Clearly, it does not matter. Because actually, post-debate, all the numbers go the other way. Not anything to do with that debate. Because that debate is for people who are paying attention to such things. And statistically, people who are paying attention to such things were probably voting for Harris anyways. It is when they found the double down on the anti-immigrant rhetoric. And so I do not disagree with you that part of what's lacking in our body politic is a lack of trust. And I feel that.
Yes.
Right? I in the same way that I had a hard time trusting the people leading my denomination at a time where I knew they were actively working to rip it apart.
Right.
I have a hard time. And it is perhaps a failing in my soul, and I'll own that. But if we're being honest, if honest conversations was a part of the pitch, I do have a hard time trusting someone who looks at the Bible, who looks at the good news of Jesus Christ, who looks at the prophets, who looks at, we just did, what are the two greatest commandments? Love the Lord your God, love your neighbor as yourself. right? Who then looks at a struggling immigrant family trying to scrape it by, sleeping 4 kids to a bed, 8 people in a 600 square foot apartment that hasn't been updated or repaired since the 60s, and goes, fuck them, get them out of my country. I have a hard time with that. I'm going to be honest. I have a hard time with that.
Taking fear into the booth rather than love into the booth.
Yes. Well, and so one of the things that has come out of this that I have liked is the response from people giving resources, giving space, like the liturgy that we wrote. There have been so many good posts in my feeds because of the people who I associate with about, hi, if you are LGBTQ and you want to get married real quick, give me a call. If you are having trouble with your mental health because you are in this category of marginalized people, here is the resource for you. Call this hotline.
Oh, that's great.
There's been a lot of calls for unity. There's been a lot of calls for, and I feel like it would have been that way. And I feel like perhaps that's a response every election, because no matter what election, because we're a 2-party system, there's always going to be people disappointed at the end of it.
Yeah.
But this call for unity, this call for encouraging, maybe it's brought some of those things to the forefront, and maybe it's motivated some of those who were not before on the side of justice to then step up and do as we are doing, speak out for justice and speak out with and to offer those resources to people who are in need of those.
Specifically one I'll plug, Reconciling Ministries Network, who I do a lot of work with. I'm used to like talking in coded language about this. This is not the show where I have to do that. I do a lot of work with RMN. They have a hotline specifically for queer people who are experiencing pain and suffering around this. And so just go to their website and there will be how exactly you do that. But it's being run by some affirming clergy to offer kind of pastoral care.
And that's Reconciling Ministry Network?
Reconciling Ministries Network.
And let's link some more resources.
Yeah, I'll put in the show description we'll pull together some useful resources, but that's one that, of folks that I know, love, and trust. And I think it's literally like you call the office and you press 1. And you're just like going to talk to somebody because it's trying to be as human as possible. So after Trump won the first time, John Oliver, comedian, I deeply appreciate, who y'all are infinitely tired of hearing about. In his wrap up to his 2020 season, kind of did he does less of a character than like Colbert did. He's much more in the Jon Stewart tradition of just like, this is just me. But even just like not being funny, just being real, which is actually what I like about those kind of shows that he and Stewart do, is like you can be funny, you can tell the news with dick jokes, but you can also have moments of candor and it doesn't feel wild. He said, okay, write down in a Post-it note and stick it somewhere you're gonna be able to say it. This is not normal. Right. And like this was a message from 4 years ago. No, excuse me, 8 years ago. This was from after Trump won the first time. This was the end of his season 8 years ago. This is not normal. What I would honor that advice, but I would write something different, because unfortunately, 8 years ago this felt like an aberration, and
now it feels normal.
I thought a lot about like what how do you begin a resistance against this, right? And I think for us, we'll fight less in the political realm, but more in the theological realm. But like, how do we resist this? I think the thing I would write down on that Post-it note is, don't let them control how you feel. Right? The goal of megalomaniacal narcissism, this time in a tinted orange, is there's a reason he was really popular in the professional wrestling. is they want to control your emotions. They don't care what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a version of don't let the bastards get you down.
Don't let the bastards get you down. Right. Like, don't, like, they want to control. They want to control your bodies. They want to control your minds. Like, evil writ large wins when we are hopeless and isolated and do not believe that anything else is possible.
When we operate out of fear rather
When
than
we
love.
operate out of fear. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, the thing I write in that post-it note is like, don't let them control how you feel.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right? That we're going to see a lot of wild shit in the next 4 years of our lives. That it's only going to be the next 4 years. We're going to see a lot of wild shit. We're going to see a lot of shit that just is offensive, is morally reprehensible, is racist is a given. But like just fucking wild shit. And part of that is that's how, where that the core voters that love that shit, that plays to them. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is to, again, pull from wrestling, is to get cheap heat, right? To get cheap heat from us, to feel like, well, shit, how do we, like, we're just so mad, we are being controlled too. And so it is like, yeah, don't let them run you. Mm-hmm. But also I think there is, understand that this is no longer about, to me, this is no longer about some status quo that's just going to come back. Mm-hmm. It's just not. Yeah. I think with the popular vote going in the way it did, that feels like that ship sailed to me. If I had any hope of that, like, that ship sailed. This is now about how do we resist whatever the fuck this is, and how do we help folks in the midst of it, and how do we work together to forge a different world.
Mm-hmm. There's a really beautiful prayer that the West Ohio Conference put out, the West Ohio Conference of the United Methodist Church put out. They quote Romans 12, and then it's exactly that. It's a prayer for hope. It's a prayer for what do we do next in the midst of this. Now that we're here, what are we going to do? Shall we share it?
Sure. Yeah, go
please.
for it.
Okay, so first they read Romans 12, verses 16 and 21. It says, live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And the prayer, it doesn't say who wrote it, but it says, Jesus, we look to you for strength and hope. As we walk into the unknown of a new day, we've been disappointed and hurt by what we have seen and heard in the lead up to this year's national election. You taught us to love each other as siblings, but we struggle to embrace people who look, think, and act differently than us. Please heal the wounds we have inflicted on each other and help us to be more like you, treating others as we wish to be treated. Fill our hearts with compassion for one another and guide us in setting good examples that future generations will want to follow. Help us unite communities by living love and modeling encouragement, by putting an end to finger-pointing, hatred, and violence. May we have the strength to be agents of peace, healing, and hope in a country where many are choosing division instead of diversity. Allow your church and its people to be the center of justice, love, and mercy, embracing, uniting, and transforming all through the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Yeah. Amen. And so, where do we go from here? I don't know. Right? But I think who we are as the Divine Provisions Co. changes in light of this. Right? I think part of, this moment we find ourselves in changes who we are. Mm-hmm. And so we somewhat did this as like, hey, we don't have an easy resolution because we don't. Some of this is just to sit in it and go, it sucks. It sucks. We're let down by people we know. people who claim the name of Christ. And like, it's sometimes hard to reconcile all of that. But the work that we do together, not just the three of us, but the work that all of us we do together is a part of how a new world is born.
Well, this dialogue is bold that we do here, and taking bold dialogue out into the world like this, having the conversations that haven't fit before, that there hasn't been a place for before. That's what we're trying to do on this show, and I think that's really a big part of how we move forward from here, is having intentional conversations that don't and haven't always fit inside the box, and being unapologetic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And inviting you, our listeners, also into that conversation, into that dialogue. Write us. Let us know what you think.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever it is, we're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
When Trump was first elected the first time in 2016, I served a very rural place, town of 1,100 people, a county that broke like 90%. It was like 90% for Trump. It was like the perfect Trump. It was the perfect Trump county. It was closed Alcoa plant, closed coal mine, rural area. It was like the perfect intersection of Trump voters, of early Trump voters. And I had a member of my church. I'll anonymize this as much as I can, but I had a leader in my church who was not of that persuasion, and I had never. In my like church ministry, it's part of why this is separate. It's like my church ministry, like you gotta, be a pastor to everybody. And so I try to maintain some neutrality, but like he had kind of figured out that like I didn't fit in Lexington, Texas. And he's this, normally this very mild mannered, quiet, geeky guy. And he came into my office weeping and looked at me and said, "Pastor, if I ever need to help somebody because of what's going on, you let me know. I'll do anything it takes." And I hope I was comforting to him in that moment or something. I don't know. I often don't know. But I was comforted in that moment because I remembered even in this town of 1,100 people, I wasn't alone. We are not alone. You can feel alone. The numbers are bad. But we are not alone. And if we believe that, God works in the gathered body, remember that we are a body who are gathered. And that, in the grand arc of history, we've been here before. We may be here again. But God can lead us through it together. Mm-hmm. But you are not alone. We have resources. We have each other. And from there, I don't know. So yeah, please write in. divineprovisionsco@gmail.com. Tell your stories. Offer your help. We would love to, offer resources if you have thoughts. Would love to do tag on to the episode that we're producing for next week. Just like, hey, here are some stories. Here are some resources. Here are some cool things that people are doing to start helping and protecting people. divineprovisionsco@gmail.com. If you want more from us, if hearing us from our perspective talk into microphones about things that we think matters helps you, it certainly helps us doing it, clearly. Follow us on the things. We will never be on Twitter. I deleted it from my phone. Sorry, Twitter. No, I'm not sorry, Twitter. Actually, I'm sorry, Twitter. Problem is it's not that anymore. Anyways, at Divine Provisions Co. on most things, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, Divine Provisions C, on TikTok, divineprovisions.co on the internet. If you'd like to support us, like, comment, subscribe, share, leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, give financially. If you're able to, head to buy, this stuff costs money. To do this work, there's a donate button on our website. Again, that is divineprovisions.co. This is not I have a normal outro for this, and this is like a less overtly like, hi, we're Christians and so should you. But I'll close this one the way I close most of our shows, which is go in peace to love and serve the Lord. And we will see you next time.